10 days, just 10 short, impatiently crossed off days on the kitchen calendar, and I'm finally leaving for vacation. Probably the last time I looked forward to something this much was when I was a teenager and my mom and I would go for ice cream at that little ice cream shop near our house, where the blue plastic chairs always stuck to my skin and the cotton candy stuck to my fingers and lips. Now, of course, everything is completely different. I'm 26, and I live an adult life filled with worries and obligations, but the anticipation of a vacation gives me the same joyful tremors. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy! My name is Brenda, and I was literally jumping on the walls with excitement, counting down the days until my departure. I've been waiting for this moment for months now, catching myself going over the list of things I'll take with me, imagining the sun sliding across the water, the warm wind tickling my face. I've been dreaming about this vacation since the moment I finished my last project at work and realized that I could finally escape the concrete embrace of the city. My family and I will go to the same house on the lake that I inherited 2 years ago from my great-aunt Margaret, an amazing woman with a sharp tongue and a heart that always had a place for me. This house is not just real estate, not just square meters by the water, it is a piece of my soul, a memory of those times when life seemed simple and pure. When happiness was measured by the number of watermelons eaten and the hours spent on the pier. The house is only a 6-hour drive from my apartment, but every time I go there, it feels like I'm covering more than just distance. I'm returning to another dimension, to another version of myself. Everything is different there. The air smells of pine and ozone, the silence rings, and even the most intense thoughts slow down, like leaves slowly falling to the surface of the water. This place has absorbed all the best from my childhood. My parents and I spent every summer there, and I still remember my mother laughing, standing in the kitchen in a bright apron, with flour on her cheeks and the smell of pie soaked into her hair. Everything was so simple then, so real, back when my mother was still with us. She died when I was only 16. Cancer was merciless and swift, as if someone had torn the light and warmth out of our lives, leaving no time even to say goodbye. Dad was broken by this grief, devastated to the very core, and I was with him. It was as if he and I had lost our center of gravity, wandering around the house, where everything reminded us of her, the smell of perfume on the pillow, an unfinished cup of faded flowers, a photograph on the refrigerator that I couldn't put away, but also couldn't look at. For a whole year, we learned to breathe again, not because we wanted to, but because there was no other way. And then Rebecca came into his life. He met her at work, and at first she seemed quite nice to me, a widow, also with baggage of pain, with 2 adult daughters, Jessica and Sarah, who were already studying in college and were 5 or 6 years older than me. From the very beginning, it seemed like some kind of strange theater. I tried to be kind, open, ready for change, tried not to complain and not to make scenes, but the difference in age, in habits, in the way she and Dad suddenly began to build a new life, all this made our family something strained and unnatural. We were polite, we exchanged pleasantries over dinner, discussed the weather, but no one was mistaken. There was no real connection between us, we were just playing at being a family, pretending that everything was fine. The most painful thing was watching my father change, how he would talk with sparkling eyes about the play Sarah was in, or about Jessica's concert that the whole group went to, how he would begin to distance himself, as if I were becoming something like an old letter to him, dear but long forgotten. I felt myself slipping into the background of my own story, and there was nothing I could do about it. When I left for college in another state, I experienced mixed feelings, sadness, of course, but also a strange relief. I rarely came home during college, and when I did, I felt like an outsider in the house that once knew my every breath. Rebecca had redone everything, from the curtains to the photographs on the walls. Their faces were everywhere. There were no pictures of me left, and she never said it directly, but she made it clear that my presence here was not necessary. "Oh, Brenda, you're home again," she would say with a tight smile, as if surprised to see me back, or she would say, "I wasn't expecting you this weekend," as if I had dropped in uninvited. These little phrases, casually thrown out, pierced the heart more than any scream. After graduating from college, I had to move back home temporarily. I needed to save up for rent, get my first full-time job. I remember those few months as one long, empty exhalation. Rebecca had mastered the art of making me invisible. She would cook for 4, even though there were 5 of us. then apologize with a puzzled "oh, I didn't notice." She would plan family outings without telling me. And my father would seem not to notice, or maybe he just didn't want to. When I finally saved enough to rent a tiny studio apartment, I packed my things in one night and left, and suddenly I could breathe again. That's when Grandma Margaret, my mother's aunt, came into my life. She lived alone in a house by the lake, and I started visiting her. I bought groceries, helped with the housework, brought her tea and listened to her endless, incredible stories. She was already approaching 80, her health was deteriorating, but her mind was clear, her voice was firm, and every meeting with her was like a small holiday for the soul. We laughed, remembered Mom, looked through old photo albums. She called me Sunshine, and I probably only then began to feel truly loved again. When Margaret died, she was 92, I organized the funeral myself. I picked out flowers with my own hands, talked to the pastor, met relatives. Dad and Rebecca came, of course, but I noticed how they, standing by the coffin, exchanged glances, discussing not the memory of her, but the house that was left to me. A week after Aunt Margaret's funeral, when I was beginning to settle back into a routine and console myself with cleaning, folding laundry, and random memories that surfaced in a flowered cup or the sound of an old grandfather clock, the lawyer called, and I realized at the sound of his even, almost emotionless voice that everything was just beginning. He told me that my aunt had left me not only the house, but also a significant amount of money, more than I could have imagined. I thanked him and hung up, looking out the window for a long time, not believing that that small, thin woman with clear eyes and a strong voice had now given me the opportunity to start over. The following week I went to my dad's for dinner, a simple evening, like before, macaroni and cheese, salad, the smell of fried onions, everything looked familiar, but I knew what I would say. While we were eating, I put down my fork and said, "Dad, I think I should sell the house, it would help me buy a place closer to work, make life easier." I wasn't there much anyway. He opened his mouth to say something, but Rebecca, as always, was quicker. "Don't rush into this, Brenda," she said, carefully dabbing her lips with a napkin. "This kind of real estate is a gold mine. Lake houses only go up in value, and besides, we could all use it as a family vacation spot." She emphasized the word all, as if she were persuading herself and not me. Dad nodded, pressing his lips together, as if it hadn't occurred to him that I might do something different with the house. "Your stepmother is right, Brenda. It's a smart investment. Leave it as is for now," he said, as if summing it up. I didn't say anything, just nodded, and deep down I felt another piece of freedom disappear. Still, I left everything as it was, and even gave them a spare key. I stupidly thought that they would drop in from time to time, maybe in the summer or on weekends. I didn't expect them to act like it was their property, like I was just an occasional guest. At first, I didn't pay attention to it. I had work, projects, clients. Sometimes I heard from friends that someone had seen Rebecca or Jessica at the house, but I thought it was nothing. They were careful, left everything in order, didn't touch my things. But everything changed one July day, when I decided to take a few days off, turn off my phone and spend a couple of days in silence, by the water, among the smells of tree resin and the soft rustle of the waves. I arrived at the end of the day. The sun was already setting, goldening the tops of the trees. Climbing the steps, I inserted the key into the lock, pushed the door and froze. From inside the house came laughter, the bass of speakers, and someone squealing with delight. I walked inside, barefoot on the cold wooden floor, and out onto the back porch, where, among the hanging lights and plastic cups, Jessica stood with 6 of her friends, glasses in hand and looking carefree. She was laughing, telling a story, and one of the guys had his arm around her waist. She turned and saw me, and instantly her face became distasteful, as if I had broken some rule. "What are you doing here?" she asked, without lowering her voice, without even an attempt to apologize or sound surprised. I was taken aback. "I live here," I replied, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "This is my house." Jessica pursed her lips and crossed her arms. "Well, we're having a party. You're kind of ruining the vibe." I couldn't believe my ears. "Sorry, this is my house, Jessica. I decide who's welcome here." The tension was immediate. Her friends stopped laughing, some shifted awkwardly, some looked away, and she looked at me as if I'd insulted her personally. The party was over almost immediately. Most of the kids left that evening, and Jessica and 2 others left the house in the morning without even saying goodbye. I was exhausted and angry, but most of all, disappointed. Later that evening, the phone rang. It said, "Rebecca." I sighed, but answered, "Brenda. How could you be so rude to Jessica and her friends?" Her voice was indignant and icy. She just wanted to have some fun. I tried to remain calm. "Rebecca, this is my house. I didn't even know they were there." She sighed into the receiver, long and hard. "You put her in a terrible position. She feels humiliated. You could have been a little more understanding." I almost dropped the phone. Understanding? She told me that I was ruining the atmosphere for them in my own home. I blurted out, no longer holding back my irritation. The answer was a click. She simply hung up. From then on, everything became even colder. Dad stopped calling, and when he did, his voice was distant, alien. I decided that this was how everything would be from now on: dry, tense, unreciprocated. That's why I was so surprised when, 3 weeks ago, in the middle of the workday, Dad called me himself. His voice was shaking, as if he was working up the courage. "Brenda, honey, could you come over for dinner tonight? Rebecca and well, we want to talk to you about something." I froze. We hadn't spoken in months, not since the day I'd found Jessica at my house. I'd driven over that night with a heavy heart, nervousness, anxiety, and a tiny spark of hope. What if they understood? What if Rebecca realized how unfairly she'd treated me? Dad opened the door with that smile I hadn't seen in a long time, big, warm, almost familiar. The same one he used to wear on those days when he'd come home from work clutching a pizza box to his chest and tell me we deserved a plateless dinner. He even hugged me, tightly, with a soft whisper, "Brenda, you look wonderful. Come in, come in." The gesture confused me. It had been too long since there had been spontaneous affection in our family. I walked in, holding back cautious hope, and saw Rebecca in the living room. She stood up as I entered, nodded, and said, "Hi, Brenda, thanks for coming." And frankly, she seemed different, not exactly warm, but rather trying to be polite, careful, as if choosing her words with effort, like someone who had rehearsed the dialogue in advance. I settled into the chair across from them, my legs tucked under me as usual, and asked, "So, what did you want to talk about?" Dad and Rebecca exchanged a quick glance, and he leaned forward a little, folding his hands, as if in prayer. "We were thinking. And we miss those times when we were together, as a family. We know there's been a lot of tension between us lately, and we want to fix it." I was silent, my heart pounding in my chest, because hearing that, even after all this, still felt important. "We were hoping," Rebecca continued, "that maybe we could all go to your lake house for the holidays, all together. Me, your dad, Jessica, Sarah, and their fiancés." I blinked. "Fiancés?" I asked, not quite believing it. Rebecca beamed, her face almost glowing. "Yeah, both girls got engaged this year, Jessica to Mark, and Sarah to David. They're really lovely boys. I'm sure you'll love them." I felt a strange mixture: joy, because I was part of a family, invited to something real, and pain, because no one had bothered to even tell me that the girls were engaged. No one had called, texted, or sent a photo. It was like a blow to the memory of being on the fringes, but I didn't show it. I smiled and nodded. "That sounds really great, actually. When were you thinking about going?" "Next month," Dad replied. "We can take 10 days, really relax, reconnect, closer to each other." "I'd love that," I said, and it was true. Despite everything, despite the hurt and the past, I missed my family. I needed this chance, like a breath of air. "How many people?" I asked, already picturing myself arranging chairs by the deck. Rebecca counted on her fingers. "6. Well, 6 of us, and you're 7. I nodded, trying to remember everything. I had already started making plans in my head. I needed to clean the entire house, prepare everything. By everything, I lived in anticipation for the next 2.5 weeks, as if I were anticipating something big, almost festive. I went out to the lake house for the weekend, hauled buckets, scrubbed the bathroom, washed all the sheets and pillowcases, vacuumed the carpets. Even though I'd been meaning to replace them for a long time, I even made myself a separate folder with notes, a list of groceries, a list of cleaning supplies, a list of everything one of them might want. I bought groceries for a week in advance: meat, vegetables, cereals, snacks. I bought new toothpaste, fresh towels, lots of toilet paper, sunscreen and mosquito repellent. I even bought new furniture for the terrace: a wooden table with wide benches and a few sun loungers so that everyone would be comfortable. I bought inflatable rings, cushions for the chairs, candles against insects. I wanted it to be beautiful, so that everyone who came would feel that they were expected here. 3 days before leaving, I literally walked around the apartment, clutching the list to my chest and shaking with excitement, like a child on Christmas Eve. I took time off from work, packed my suitcase, checked the coolers, bags of food, the first aid kit, everything was ready, and just at this moment, when I thought that everything was behind me and all that was left was to wait, my dad called again. His voice was wary. "Brenda, could you come over tonight? Rebecca and I need to discuss something about the vacation." I immediately answered, "Sure, is something wrong? I think I have everything ready, but if there's anything you want to bring, just let me know." A pause. "We'll talk when you get there," he said curtly, and I hung up, frowning anxiously. As we walked, I wondered if they were offering to help with the expenses, or if they were bringing something special, or if they were planning a surprise. I had no idea how naive I was at that moment. Dad opened the door himself again, but this time he didn't hug me, he didn't even look me in the eye, as if he was uncomfortable, as if he wanted to be anywhere but here. "Come in, Brenda," he said, and I knew right away that something was wrong. Rebecca was sitting on the couch, and this time she didn't even get up, didn't say, "Thank you for coming." She just looked at me with an expression on her face that was neither polite nor sympathetic. Only coldly determined, the same Rebecca I remembered, strong, sharp, alien. "Sit down," she said, making no effort to soften her tone. I sat in the same chair I had 3 weeks ago, but now everything felt different. Dad sat next to her, but he didn't say a word, just fiddling with his fingers, as if he were chewing something painfully inside. So I sat in that same chair, still with the remnants of hope in my voice, and, trying to stay cheerful, I began to speak. "I've been thinking about the menu for our first night. I'd like to make salmon and maple sauce. You remember, Dad, you liked it so much." I was already reaching for my notebook where I had written down recipes, but Rebecca suddenly interrupted me, not even letting me finish. Her voice was even, but it no longer held any of the delicacy she had displayed a few weeks ago. "Brenda, we need to talk about the vacation." I paused, still smiling, although my stomach was already clenching uncomfortably. "Okay," I said, setting my notebook down on my lap. "What did you want to discuss?" Rebecca took a deep breath, theatrically slow, as if she were about to voice something she had been nursing for a long time. "We've decided that you're not coming with us." I couldn't help but laugh, not out of joy, but out of complete certainty that this was a ridiculous joke. "Sorry, what?" I asked, smiling slightly, sure that she was about to say, "Just kidding, Brenda," but she just looked at me evenly, emotionless. "I'm serious, you're not going on this vacation." The smile vanished from my face, as if someone had wiped it away. I blinked, trying to make sense of it. "But, this is my house, I prepared it." "Yes, but this vacation is meant for family," she interrupted, and for a second there was a hint of steel in her voice. I froze. "A real family?" I asked slowly, feeling something inside me shrink to a thread. It sounded like a slap. "A real family." My dad had been looking at the floor the entire time, clenching his fingers as if that would keep him from crying or screaming. I turned to him. "Rebecca, 3 weeks ago, you and Dad invited me, both of you. It was your mutual choice." "We changed our minds," she shrugged, as if this was a matter of choosing a pasta sauce and not destroying the last vestiges of trust. "We want to use this vacation to strengthen our bonds with my daughters and their fiancés. This is a very important time for us, and, frankly, your presence will only create tension." "Create awkwardness? In my own home?" I asked, my voice shaking now. "We have a key," she said calmly, and her tone carried the confidence with which a person claims something she has long considered her own. "You can use the house after we leave." I turned to Dad. "Are you okay with that? Do you agree?" He finally looked up, and his eyes were full of shame, helplessness, weakness. "Brenda, maybe it's better this way," he began, but I was already clenching my fists. "Better what, Dad?" "Better if I let you kick me out of my own home and pretend it's okay?" "You're being dramatic again," Rebecca interjected, pursing her lips slightly. "We're not kicking you out, we just think this should remain a family vacation." "So I'm not a family?" My voice became quieter, almost a whisper. Dad winced, as if these words cut him from the inside, but he remained silent, and Rebecca just shrugged. "You said it, not me." I sat for a few seconds, as if trying to catch my breath, to absorb what was happening. to comprehend how 3 weeks of planning, joy, and effort aimed only at restoring something fragile and almost lost were erased by one indifferent look. "Let me get this straight," I said, feeling my voice tremble treacherously, but I kept talking. "You want me to let you, your whole gang, live in my house, eat food that I bought, sleep on clean sheets that I washed, relax on furniture that I bought especially for this vacation, and you don't have to be there because I'm not family?" "Now you get it," Rebecca said, and I swear there was a satisfied smile in her eyes. I looked at my father again. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but nothing came out, and that silence was the clearest answer for me. I stood up, slowly, with that confidence that comes when you understand that there is nothing more to wait for. I took my purse without saying goodbye and headed for the door. "Enjoy your vacation," I said without even turning around. "Brenda, wait," Dad called, but I was already at the threshold, and only Rebecca's voice caught up with me, sharp, cutting. "Don't overdramatize everything." I slammed the door behind me and almost ran to the car. My hands were shaking so much behind the wheel that I could barely insert the key into the lock. I was shaking with rage, with humiliation, with helplessness. That evening, I walked back and forth in my apartment as if in a cage, gritting my teeth, with my pulse pounding in my temples. I couldn't stop, as if every movement helped burn off the rage that was seething inside. How dare they? How could Rebecca allow herself to do this, talk to me like I was a stranger, pretend that I was imposing myself, as if they were doing me a favor by excluding me from their lives? And Dad? Oh my God, Dad. He just sat there, quiet, hunched over, not making a sound, not standing up for me, not saying enough. The more I turned it over in my head, the more angry I became. They wanted to use my home, breathe my air, enjoy the peace I'd fought for, and then claim that I wasn't part of their circle. The hypocrisy alone took my breath away. I knew I wouldn't let this go unpunished. No, never. I woke up the next day with a burning sense of injustice in my chest, and I spent the whole day thinking. One voice inside me told me to call my father and tell him everything, to spill everything that had been building up, but I knew it would lead to nothing. He was too pliable, too tied down. Rebecca had him in her orbit, and he had already proven that he wasn't going to fight. Then, that very evening, as I paced the room, exhausted, still pulsating with a mixture of anger and bitterness, a light bulb suddenly went off in my head. Not just an idea, but a whole decision, mature, clear, cold. I realized that screaming and crying were empty, but acting was a completely different matter. I decided to wait, let them think they had won, let them believe in their victory, in the fact that they had once again managed to push me aside, to deprive me of my voice and place in the family circle. Let them make their own plans, share rooms in my house, discuss the menu and imagine an idyllic vacation, not suspecting that I was also preparing, only for my own scenario. And when they, cheerful, with smiles and suitcases, anticipating family unity, arrive to open my door, I will arrange a meeting for them that they will never forget. The next evening, still in that state of sharp, focused focus, I was scrolling through my Facebook feed when I came across a post by Jessica that literally hit me in the chest. There, in a glamorous tone, she wrote, "So excited for our family vacation next week, finally getting to spend time with the people who matter most, without the drama and unwanted guests. Some people just don't know when they're not welcome." I froze, staring at those words as if they'd been etched with a hot iron. The comments were even worse. Sarah added, "Finally just us." And Rebecca and Dad liked it. Yes, even Dad, he liked it, and it all became crystal clear. There was no accident, no ambiguity. This wasn't just resentment, this was cold, planned isolation. And if they wanted to play games, fine, so could I. I immediately grabbed the phone and called Lisa, my friend who not only knew everything about my family, but was also always ready to help. "Liz, remember that lake house I told you about?" I began, trying to sound calm, but my voice was still shaking with indignation. "Want to go there with me next week? Free vacation, seriously? Just give me the address. What's the catch?" She laughed. "No catch. Well, actually, there might be problems with my family, but I'll handle it." "Oh, drama?" Now I'm even more interested. What happened? I told her the whole story, not leaving out a single detail. By the end, her voice was dark with anger. "Those bastards, I'm with you. And if you need more people, I'll bring Mark and Jenny, the more the merrier," I said. "I want the house full, so that they could come and see that everything was already taken." that they weren't welcome, that I was the owner. The next few days were spent calling, texting, packing. I had brought in everyone who was available: Lisa, Mark, Jenny, and then Tom, the other Sarah, and Mike, 6 people who, upon learning that we were going on a free vacation to a house by the lake, were not only happy, but also determined to support me. I explained to everyone, yes, there might be conflict, yes, it might be awkward, but they all just nodded and said, "We're with you," and that was damn important. The day before the supposed family move, I drove out to the house, my heart pounding, but there was determination in it. I had already called a locksmith in advance. I had made an appointment a week ago. When the plan was just beginning to take shape, he arrived exactly on time, with a box of tools, a serious face. 2 hours later, the locks were changed. I paid him in cash, took a set of shiny new keys, and when he drove away, I stood on the porch for a few minutes, listening to the wind, carrying the scent of pine needles and feeling relief finally settle in my chest. Then I went inside and cooked myself a nice, home-cooked meal, something simple but my favorite, pasta with garlic and cream sauce. I opened a bottle of wine, grabbed a glass, and went out onto the terrace. The sun was setting, the lake was shining like a mirror, and orange-purple clouds floated in the sky. I sat and watched the day fade, and I knew that tomorrow would be special. I barely slept that night, my head full of thoughts, scenes, possible conversations. Would they be angry or confused? Would Dad try to change anything? Would he stand up to Rebecca? Probably not, but despite everything, I still had hope. Around noon the next day, I heard cars roaring in the driveway. My heart leapt. There they were. I went upstairs to the bedroom, which had a window facing the front. I peered cautiously around the curtain. The first car was Dad and Rebecca, together as always. She was saying something, pointing toward the house. The second was Jessica and Mark in a red Honda. The third was Sarah and David in a blue SUV. They were all laughing, talking, looking relaxed, as if they were in for a fabulous vacation. I saw Rebecca, still confident, take the key out of her purse. Dad was carrying a cooler. The girls were lugging suitcases, backpacks, beach bags. Rebecca went to the door, inserted the key, and, nothing, she turned it again, harder, then wiggled the handle, pulled. The lock didn't budge. From the balcony, I saw her frown and say something to Dad. He put the bag down, came over, tried it himself, same result. They exchanged a few short words, then turned and walked to the back door. I knew it was the same: new locks, new rules, a new me. It was at that very second, when their fingers bounced off the unyielding doorknobs in confusion, when they walked around the house and tried unsuccessfully to open the back door, that I saw this moment as if someone had turned on a light in a dark room, and the expression on their faces changed from mild confusion to something much darker, fury, on Rebecca's face. This change happened in a matter of seconds, from surprise to undisguised fury, as if someone had dared to disrupt her carefully constructed script. She came to the door and began knocking with unexpected force, quickly at first, then loudly, almost threateningly, her fist thumping against the wood. "Brenda! Open that door right now!" Her cry was sharp, piercing, and I had to stop myself from smiling. I went down the stairs slowly, step by step, without rushing, with that inner calm that comes from being in complete control of a situation. The knocking grew more furious, almost echoing through the house. I went to the door, pulled it open on the chain, and peered through the narrow crack. "Hello," I said as gently as I could, with a smile that was completely out of keeping with the tension of the moment. "How can I help you?" Rebecca's face was purple with anger, her eyes blazing. "What have you done to the locks?" she growled. "The key doesn't fit." "Oh, yeah. Sure," I said calmly, ducking my head slightly. "I changed them, they're my locks now. You can't do that." Jessica screamed, pushing forward, her voice shaking with indignation. "We had a vacation planned." "Really?" I asked, still speaking in the same tone you'd use when explaining to a child why they shouldn't eat ice cream before bed. "That's interesting, because if I remember correctly, you made it clear last week that this vacation was for real family only, and since you said I wasn't one, I decided I wasn't going to let strangers into my house." Rebecca made a strangled sound, as if she was choking on indignation. Dad looked at me, his face contorted in pain. "You can't be serious," he muttered, finally finding his voice. "Brenda, it took us 6 hours to get here." "That sounds like your problem," I replied calmly, looking him straight in the eye. That's absurd. Sarah screamed, "We're your family." You? I asked, raising my eyebrows, because if I remember correctly, Rebecca just made it very clear that I'm not part of your real family, so why on earth would I let strangers into my home? Rebecca began to babble, choosing her words carefully, but her confidence crumbled like sand. You can't. Actually, I can, I interrupted, losing my patience. This is my house, the papers are in my name, I decide who has the right to be here. Mark, standing next to Jessica, suddenly spoke, his voice pleading, "We've already paid for everything. We took time off from work. Jessica bought a car especially for this trip," Dad added desperately, "we don't have money for a hotel." "Well, then you have a serious problem," I shrugged. Without a hint of sympathy, Rebecca suddenly found her voice, shrill, accusing, "You're being selfish, revengeful, we're your family." "No," I answered firmly, without a shadow of a doubt, "you've made it clear that I'm nothing to you, you can't bend the rules when it suits you, Rebecca. I won't let you take advantage of my kindness when it suits you, or reject me when you feel like it." I started to slowly close the door, but Rebecca stepped forward abruptly, trying to stop me. "You can't do this. You're ruining our entire vacation." She shouted. "It's already ruined," I said, and with that I closed the door, this time for good. I heard them standing outside for another 10 minutes. Rebecca was crying, wailing about how I'd ruined everything. Jessica was shouting insults that I wasn't going to repeat, and Dad, my dad, was quietly begging me to be reasonable, calling me honey, saying that everything could be fixed, but I already knew it couldn't. Finally, I heard the car start up. One by one, the engines roared, and soon everything was quiet. They were gone. I waited another minute to make sure, and then immediately called Lisa. "The coast is clear, you can go." "Are you serious? You really did it?" Her voice was full of delight. "I did it, and it was amazing." By the evening of the same day, the house was full of laughter and joy. All 6 of my friends showed up as planned. We grilled burgers on the patio, laughed until we cried, swam in the lake, sat by the fire with glasses of wine and talked about everything except betrayal, hurt and pain. It was the best vacation I've had in years. The week flew by like one long, light-filled day. We swam, fished, went boating, had mini picnics on the pier and fell asleep to the sound of the waves, forgetting about everything that was happening beyond this lake. Every evening on that cozy terrace, filled with soft light from the lamps, we would have a small barbecue, where the aroma of roasting meat and vegetables mixed with the smell of the lake, and the laughter of my friends drowned out the rustling of the leaves. And every time I looked at their faces, tired, happy, relaxed, I caught myself thinking that this is how a family should feel. Not the one that is imposed on you by blood or marriage, but the one that you choose with your heart, which accepts you unconditionally, does not require you to adapt, does not make you live with a sense of guilt or fear that your every step will be misinterpreted. People who enjoy your company, who laugh at your jokes, even if they are not very successful, who look at you not through the prism of reproaches, but simply as a person whom they are glad to see nearby. Lisa never tired of repeating that this was her best vacation in her entire life. On our last evening, sitting on the pier, hugging her knees and watching the sun slowly sink below the horizon, she said, "Your family is idiots if they can't see that you are golden. And they certainly don't deserve this house or you." She waved her hand toward the smooth surface of the lake, which reflected the crimson gold clouds. "You deserve to be with people who see you and appreciate you." And I couldn't help but agree. In the end, my vacation lasted longer than I had planned. Instead of 10 days, I spent 2 weeks in the house. I had vacation days saved up, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to go back. This time reminded me why I once loved this place so much, not for its silence or picturesqueness, but for the way it allows you to be yourself, throwing off all the weight of city stress and family drama. And I realized what a fool I had been, allowing people who valued neither me nor the house itself to have free reign over it while I avoided it as if it belonged to someone else. When I finally packed my things and drove back to the city, a new, calmer confidence lived inside me. I felt renewed, as if something had finally fallen into place, but this feeling was almost immediately overshadowed when I found a letter in the mailbox. The handwriting on the envelope was recognizable, clear, slightly inclined to the right. "Rebecca." My heart involuntarily sank. I opened the envelope, unfolded the 3 neatly folded sheets of paper and began to read. Everything was exactly As I expected, a stream of accusations, caustic remarks, and deliberately cold phrases, under which emotions were clearly boiling. Rebecca wrote about my selfishness, cruelty, how I ruined their long-awaited family vacation, and how deeply disappointed she was in me. But it wasn't the last paragraph that made me feel hurt, it was outright laughter. I even laughed out loud, sitting in my kitchen with the letter in my hands. I expect you to apologize for your childish behavior. Until you do, we will not communicate. Consider yourself excluded from the family. Excluded from the family? It sounded like I was a member of some elite club from which I was now being excluded for not fitting in. It wasn't a threat, it was a release. I turned on my laptop, opened my email, and wrote a short, laconic letter. Rebecca, I am not going to apologize for anything. In fact, I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. Good luck. I hit send and immediately blocked all the numbers. Rebecca's, Dad's, Jessica's, Sarah's. That was it. A few days later, I noticed that I was getting calls from unfamiliar numbers. As soon as I heard familiar voices, I immediately hung up. Even when a woman called once and introduced herself as Rebecca's friend, I understood why she was calling and hung up. Enough. I was tired of being a participant in their eternal theater. About a month later, on an ordinary gray weekday, I left the office and headed to my car in the parking lot and suddenly saw him. Dad was standing, leaning against the driver's door. He looked bad, tired, aged, somehow devastated. His shoulders were slumped, his face was pale, his eyes were tired. Brenda, please, can we talk? He asked, and there was no pressure or reproach in his voice, only a request. I was about to pass by. My heart sank, but my legs stopped on their own. I turned around. What do you want, Dad? Can we just have coffee? We went to a small cafe across the street, with worn tables and the smell of cinnamon in the air. Dad ordered coffee but never touched it. I poured myself a cup of tea and just looked at him while he collected his thoughts. I'm sorry, he finally said, looking into his mug. I'm really sorry, Brenda, I was weak. I let Rebecca push you away. I knew it was wrong, and I let it happen anyway. I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I listened in silence. Why now? I asked, what's different? He ran his hand over his face, as if he wanted to wipe the last few months off himself. Vacation was terrible. Rebecca and the girls were always complaining about you, about how you ruined everything. Even when you weren't there, they were angry, frustrated, and all I could do was think about you, about how unfair we were to you. I looked at him hard. Did you figure it out yourself? Or did Rebecca tell you to find me? He pressed his lips together. She doesn't know I'm here. She's still mad, but I can't do this anymore. Brenda, I miss you, my daughter. His voice faltered, and I repeated, almost in a whisper, you chose them, not me. I know, he said, and I'm asking you to give me a chance to make it right. I sat in that little cafe, idly stirring my tea with a spoon, watching the tiny circle spread across the surface of the liquid, as if reflecting my own hesitation. Part of me, the part my dad had called my heart as a child, wanted to forgive him right away, to cuddle up to him like I used to when I scraped my knee and he'd picked me up. But the other, adult part of me, which had already known the pain of betrayal, shook its head. Too much had happened, too many words, looks, silences that screamed louder than any accusations had been embedded in my memory. I need time, I finally said, looking out the window, trying not to meet his eyes. I'm not ready to forgive you yet. You really hurt me badly, Dad. You betrayed me. He nodded silently, as if he had been expecting these words for a long time, like a man who had come to confession not for absolution, but for an honest admission of guilt. I understand, he said quietly. I won't rush you. Just know that I will no longer deal with Rebecca or her daughters. If there is another chance for you and me, it will be between us alone. I'm done with them. He spoke slowly, with pauses, and his every gesture seemed calculated. Rebecca said she knows she was too harsh with you, he added, as if to smooth things over, but I immediately raised my hand. I don't care what Rebecca says, I don't believe her, and I don't want her in my life anymore. Dad looked down sadly, but nodded again, accepting my terms without argument. Okay, then just us, he repeated, and there was sincerity in his voice. Maybe we could meet up sometimes, just for coffee, on neutral territory, he added with an uncertain smile. I looked at him for a long moment. We'll see how it goes, I answered, and to my surprise, I realized that I was actually willing to give it a chance, not right away, Not all at once, but at least to try. When we finished and he hugged me. Goodbye, I hugged him back, carefully, almost apprehensively, but still hugged him. Everything was different from before, there was still pain inside, and even the anger had not yet completely gone away, but it was a start, and that was enough. On the way home, I suddenly caught myself thinking that I felt better, without all the endless family drama. Without constantly tiptoeing around Rebecca's whims and tense dinners where I always felt like the odd one out, I could just be myself. That evening, I picked up the phone and called Carmen, an old friend of mine who worked as a realtor. Remember when you said you could help me buy a house? Sure, she responded happily. Are you ready to start looking? Yes, and I have one more question for you. Can I rent out the lake house as a temporary place to live for the summer? Absolutely, she answered without hesitation. Your location is great, a lake house is worth its weight in gold right now. You could get really good money, especially during the season. Wonderful, I said, and for the first time in a long time, a smile appeared on my face without effort. Please send me all the necessary documents. I hung up the phone and felt a long-forgotten feeling stir inside me, excitement. The future no longer seemed vague or forced upon me. I was going to buy a house in the city, a place that would be mine alone, without strangers' photos on the walls, without voices trying to drown out my desires, and I was going to turn the lake house, my childhood oasis, into something that would work for me, not against me. I would no longer let anyone use it as a personal dacha. As if it were something they could take without asking. Over the next few weeks, I went to showings, looked at apartments and small houses, while Carmen found 3 families willing to rent my house for the summer. The money I could get from the rent would be enough to cover the mortgage on any of the properties I liked. I met my dad for coffee twice during this time, and even though the shadow of the past still hung between us, we had found common ground. He was really trying, and I couldn't help but notice. It didn't make the mistakes go away, but it meant he wanted to move forward, which meant we had a chance after all. One evening, sitting at home, I was flipping through real estate ads, glancing at photos of houses, kitchens, living rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows, and suddenly I realized, I was happy, really happy. I had friends who loved me, a job where I felt needed, and now I was going to have my own place where I wouldn't feel like an outsider. I didn't need my dad's approval or Rebecca's blessing to live a good, dignified life. My happiness no longer depended on other people's decisions. My phone vibrated, a message from Lisa. I miss my house by the lake, when can we go back? I smiled, and my fingers typed the answer, whenever you want, it's mine, remember? And in that moment, I suddenly realized that for the first time since my mother died, I truly understood what the word mine meant, my home, my life, my choice, not dictated by someone else's expectations, not bent to someone else's ideas of what was right, but mine, sincere, honest, free, and no one else could decide for me what I deserved or where my place was. I was no longer going to wait for someone else's invitation or ask for a place at the table. I had built my own, and it was an amazing, intoxicatingly powerful feeling.